She and I went to the theater and were introduced to him properly.
Just, hello, this is...
Hello, this is Miss Tennessee. Hello, honey, where have you been all my life?
At 75, Linda Thompson finally said the words fans had always wondered about. Elvis Presley was the love of my life. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was real. She stood by him through fame, chaos, and heartbreak. Now she's ready to share what really happened behind closed doors. This isn't just love, it's the kind that never leaves. Join us as we unveil the details, how it all started and why it lasted.
So
you were 22, but...
22 going on, 13. And so
what was the occasion?
I was Miss Tennessee. I was at Miss Tennessee University in 1972.
Linda Thompson didn't plan on falling into Elvis Presley's life. It just happened. One day she was living her own life, and the next, she was standing in front of the most famous man in the world. That's how fast everything changed. They met in Memphis in 1972. She was 22, already well known in pageant circles, having been crowned Miss Tennessee.
But I didn't know. It hadn't been released to the press. So I was pretty standoffish because, I was a good Southern Baptist girl.
That was the beginning. Things moved quickly. Within days, they were talking every night. Within weeks, she was staying at Graceland. He asked her to stay longer and longer. Soon, she was part of his everyday life. It didn't take long before she was living there full-time. Linda wasn't just a guest. She became part of the household. She helped keep things in order. She made sure Elvis had what he needed. She fit into his life in a way no one expected. She just focused on the relationship. That's what made her different. He liked that she wasn't chasing fame. She had her own life, her own goals, and she didn't need anything from him. That's how she earned his trust. At first, people around Elvis didn't know what to make of her. Some thought she wouldn't last. Others thought she was just another pretty face. But Linda stayed. Not for weeks or months, but for over 4 years. That's longer than most people ever lasted around him. So what made it work? For starters, Linda gave Elvis something he couldn't buy: peace and honesty. He could talk to her about anything: his childhood, his fears, his stress, the pressure of being Elvis Presley. He felt safe with her. She saw me as a person, not a product, he once told a friend. That was the difference. They spent a lot of time doing simple things: watching TV, singing together, taking late-night drives. Linda didn't need expensive dates. She just wanted time with him. Elvis loved that. Sometimes they would stay up until sunrise, just talking. Other times he'd play the piano for her. She would sit nearby and smile, knowing those moments weren't meant for anyone else. He trusted her with his thoughts, his health, and even his pain. She knew when he was hiding something. She didn't push, she just waited until he opened up. That's called patience, and she had plenty of it. Even though she was much younger, Linda had a calmness that made Elvis feel stable. He said her presence made him feel normal again. And let's be honest, that wasn't easy to give to someone like him. In a house full of noise, she was the quiet he needed. But it wasn't all smooth. Linda noticed his habits, the usage, the late nights, the mood swings. She worried but didn't judge. She tried to help without making him feel trapped. She wasn't there to control him, she was there to care. Elvis had a large group around him all the time. Friends, staff, bodyguards. Linda was the only woman who stuck around that long in the middle of it. She once said, "I didn't want to be in the spotlight. I just wanted to be the one waiting behind it." That's a powerful kind of love. And for 4 years it worked. Elvis told his father he had never felt more understood. He once told his stepbrother, "She's the only one who can handle me." So why didn't they get married?
I thought he was still married, and I was very standoffish. And he finally, during one of his nuzzles, said, "Honey, I'm not married anymore." To which I responded, "No, I didn't."
Simple. The timing was never right. Elvis had just come out of a divorce with Priscilla. Elvis Presley met Priscilla when she was just 14, and their bond quickly grew. They married in 1967 and had one daughter, Lisa Marie. Though they shared deep love, Elvis's long tours, fame, and personal struggles created distance. They divorced in 1973. As for Linda, on the other hand, she was still figuring out who she was. Though she and Presley were close and in love after their meeting, life around them was not stable. As time went on and their relationship continued, soon things started to change. Elvis grew more distant. The pressure got worse. The people around him became harder to trust. Linda felt it. She tried to stay strong, but she was only human. She started feeling the weight of his world on her shoulders. The late nights, the worrying, and getting to watch him slip into bad habits. It all added up. She didn't stop loving him, but she started asking herself if the deep love she had for him was enough to keep her well. That's when everything started to shift. The years she never spoke about. Linda Thompson didn't rush to leave when things got tough. Even when Elvis Presley began slipping deeper into unhealthy habits, she stayed by his side. She had already given him her heart. Walking away wasn't that easy. She saw everything up close, his moods, his fears, his loneliness. She was the one he turned to when the crowd disappeared and the stage lights faded. Behind all the success, there was a man who felt tired and unsure. Linda stood beside that man. His days were upside down. He stayed up all night and slept through most of the day. Linda had to follow that rhythm. She gave up her own plans. No auditions, no big events, no personal goals. Everything now centered around Elvis, his needs, his moods, his safety. He hated being alone. If Linda left for a few hours, he'd call asking her to come back quickly. Sometimes he'd sound nervous. Other times he just wanted to hear her voice. It was clear she had become his comfort zone. There's no doubt that Elvis didn't open up to many people, but with Linda, he shared his pain. He talked about his career, his fears about fading away, and how tired he was of being Elvis every minute of the day. She tried to keep things steady. She brought him food, reminded him to drink water, and helped him rest. He didn't always listen, but he knew she was trying. The little sweet moments they shared gave her hope that he could still find joy. But the dark moments came too. Elvis would grow quiet for hours. He'd stare at nothing, lost in thought. Sometimes he got emotional and didn't know why. Linda stayed close, even when he didn't say a word. She tried to protect him from himself. She hid substances when she had to. She locked up cabinets. It wasn't easy. He would notice and get upset. But later he'd admit he was glad she did it. "You're trying to save me," he once said. Linda answered, "I just want you to live." She often felt helpless. Watching someone you love struggle and not being able to fix it is painful. But she stayed, hoping every new day would be better than the last. She wasn't part of the staff. She wasn't a friend passing through. She was the one who stayed in the room when everyone else left. She saw the difference between Elvis the legend and Elvis the man. And she loved the man, and their private moments stayed private. That's why so few people knew how deep their bond really was. Most times he would hand her small notes and messages he wrote on scraps of paper. "You keep me calm," one said. Another read, "You're the only one who sees the real me." She kept those notes. He trusted her with his image. When fans were around, she stepped back. She knew when to let him be Elvis and when to pull him back to just being a man. Sometimes he'd call her my sanity. That's how much he relied on her. All through this period, most persons close to Elvis noticed how much he leaned on her. Some respected it. Others were jealous or suspicious. But Linda didn't care. She wasn't trying to win anyone over. She was there for one person, and that was enough for her. One thing Elvis loved about her was the fact that she saw how hard he tried to keep going. Even when his body and mind were begging for rest, he kept performing. Linda could only watch and hope he wouldn't break down. He once said, "Everyone wants a piece of me, but you just want to hold me together." She did, for as long as she could. But slowly she began to feel tired too. The stress, the worry, the weight of it all started to wear her down. She missed her own dreams, her own voice. She started to ask herself questions she never had before. How much more could she give? How long could she keep going before she lost herself? At this point, she knew she had given up a lot to be with the love of her life. What she gave up to stay close.
You should have married a Southern girl. And he
You
always,
said that.
I've said that, and he always remembered my saying that, because he said, you have no idea how honest that was and how truthful. And
Before Elvis Presley entered her life, Linda Thompson had her own spotlight. She was Miss Tennessee. She had a sharp mind, confidence, and charm. She wasn't waiting around to be rescued. She was already living her story. She dated men who were famous in their own right. One was Kenny Stabler, the strong and popular quarterback of the Oakland Raiders. He was confident, fun, and full of charm. Another was Joe Namath, another top NFL star, known as much for his smooth charm as his football career. Linda even spent time with Miles Daly, a Hollywood agent connected with rising stars in film and music. These men were polished. They had plans. They knew how to treat a woman with style. Dinner dates, flowers, and public affection, it was all there. But none of them were Elvis Presley. When Elvis came into her world, the rules changed. The men before him were exciting, but with Elvis, it felt personal.
Our life was staying up all night, sleeping all day. He had a difficult time with prescription drugs, to say the least. I'm not the one who brought that out to the public. I protected him for as long as I could as well.
There was something deeper, more intense. Linda once said it wasn't just about falling in love. It was about being pulled into something bigger than herself. She didn't choose Elvis for his fame. She chose him for the feeling that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. And once she made that choice, her life stopped being about herself. She became part of his world, a world that moved fast, stayed hidden, and was hard to understand from the outside. At first, it was exciting. She thought she could still keep her identity and stay close to him. But slowly, Elvis's world swallowed her whole. She gave up her career goals. Scripts came in, but she didn't read them. Interviews were offered, but she turned them down. Agents waited for her to respond, but she didn't. Her own dreams took a back seat. She had wanted to act, write, and build something on her own. That vision faded. Everything now revolved around Elvis, his needs, his moods, and his pace. Linda wasn't trapped in a physical cage, but she was stuck in someone else's life. Every moment revolved around him. If Elvis woke at 4 in the morning, so did she. If he stayed up all night watching TV or playing music, she stayed with him. They were close, yes, but it came with pressure. She worried constantly about his health, his sadness, his silence. Some days were better than others, but the worry never really went away. Somehow it was obvious that Elvis didn't directly silence her, but his world did. She had notebooks full of poems and song lyrics, dreams she had carried since college. She was too busy being present for him to create anything for herself. There were good moments, of course. Days when Elvis was sweet and playful, nights when they laughed until sunrise. But they weren't enough to stop the quiet ache building inside her. She started to feel invisible. She kept showing up, kept helping him, kept hoping it would get easier. But it didn't. The stress got worse. The usage became more regular. His circle grew tighter, and Linda felt further away from her own self. She thought about leaving many times, but something always stopped her. Maybe it was love, maybe it was guilt, maybe it was fear of life without him. She remembered how alive she felt before Graceland. She remembered having options, ideas, freedom. Now she felt like someone watching her own life from the outside. She didn't want to walk away from him. But she didn't want to walk away from herself either. She felt like her identity was shrinking by the day. Soon she started journaling again, small entries, just a few words at night. It helped her feel like her voice still mattered, even if no one else could hear it. She once wrote, "I gave up everything to be someone's everything, but I forgot I was someone too." One evening, after another long stretch of quiet, she looked around the room. The gold records on the walls, the flashing TV, the scattered bottles, it all looked the same. But inside her, something had changed. She just knew it was time. She told Elvis she needed to go find herself again, and for once, he didn't stop her. Maybe he knew she had given all she could. At this point, she walked out of Graceland with love, but also with loss. She had loved one of the most famous men in the world, but she had paid a private price no one really saw. Apart from Linda, Presley also had other women whom he got entangled with. Although he was popularly known for many things, his voice, his moves, his style, and all but his love life always caught attention. All through his career, he was surrounded by women who either wanted to be close to him or actually became part of his story. Some of those women stayed longer than others, and some were just brief chapters. But a few truly touched his heart. One of the first serious relationships he had was with Anita Wood. This was back in the late 1950s. She was a singer and a television personality, and they were together before Elvis became the king of rock and roll. In many ways, she was his sweetheart before the fame took over. They were close, and people thought they might get married. But then Elvis went to Hollywood. The tours, the fans, and the new lifestyle changed everything. Anita later said that she still loved him when she walked away, but she had to protect her heart. She couldn't stay with someone who was slowly slipping out of reach. Another name that often comes up is Priscilla Presley. She was just a young girl, 14 years old, when she met Elvis in Germany while he was serving in the army. He was already a star. She was the daughter of a military officer. Their connection grew slowly over the years. When she was 17, she moved into Graceland. They married in Las Vegas in 1967 and had a daughter, Lisa Marie, in 1968. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple. But the truth was far more complicated. Elvis wasn't made for traditional marriage. The distance, the cheating, and the pressure of fame tore them apart. They divorced in 1973, though they remained close in many ways. After Priscilla, Elvis dated several women. Some were well known. Others stayed out of the spotlight. One of those was Sybil Shepherd, the actress and model. She was already making a name for herself in Hollywood when she met Elvis. They dated for a short while in the early 1970s. Sybil later said she liked him but felt boxed in. Elvis needed attention. He needed someone who would give everything, but she wasn't ready to live that kind of life. She had her own goals and didn't want to give up her independence. The spark between them didn't last long. In her own words, it ended before it could grow. There was also Ginger Alden, the woman who was with Elvis during his final months. She was young, only 20, and some say Elvis proposed to her. Ginger claimed he gave her a ring and talked about getting married. But others close to him weren't so sure, as many claimed their relationship moved fast but lacked real depth. In fact, many of Elvis's closest friends didn't fully trust the bond. Linda Thompson, who had lived with Elvis for 4 years before Ginger came along, believed he was not in a place to start anything serious by that point. His health was failing, and his world was shrinking. Ginger may have been there at the end, but she wasn't there through the hardest middle. Over the years, there were other women too. Actress Natalie Wood went on a few dates with him. So did singer Petula Clark. But none of these lasted. Most of these women shared the same reason why it didn't work. Elvis needed constant support, constant care, and total loyalty. He didn't want to be alone, but he also didn't make it easy to stay close. That's why Linda Thompson stood out. Unlike the others, Linda didn't just date Elvis. She became part of his world. She didn't come and go. She moved into Graceland, stayed by his side for over 4 years, and gave up her rising career to take care of him. She didn't want attention. She wanted peace for him and for their home. Other women were romantic partners. Linda became his safe space. The difference was clear. Anita was his past. Priscilla was his partner in fame. Ginger was a last-minute chapter. But Linda, she was his calm in the middle of the storm. Many of the women who dated Elvis struggled with the same thing. They were drawn to the legend, but overwhelmed by the man. His fame wasn't a spotlight. It was a hot space. And unless you were ready to burn with it, you got out fast. As most of these ladies ran from the heat, Linda stood in it. She once said that loving Elvis was like loving someone in a cage made of gold. Everything looked beautiful on the outside, but inside it was dark and lonely. And she stayed longer than anyone ever expected. Some people say Elvis was never meant to be with one woman. He was too restless. Others say he was searching for someone who could hold his full weight without losing themselves. Maybe that's why none of the other relationships lasted. Maybe that's why Linda stayed as long as she did and left only when she had nothing more to give. She didn't leave angry. She left tired. Tired of watching him fall apart. Tired of losing pieces of herself. But even after she left, she never once used his name for attention. While others wrote tell-all stories or gave interviews for money, Linda stayed quiet for years. That silence said more than words ever could. When she finally spoke, decades later, she didn't talk about the fame. She talked about the late nights, the fear, the heartbreak, and the quiet moments no one else ever saw. She talked about brushing his hair when he couldn't sleep, being there when the legend broke down, and being the only one who didn't walk away. It wasn't a perfect love. It wasn't even always happy. But it was real. Linda never tried to take Priscilla's place. She respected her deeply. She didn't compare herself to Ginger. She didn't need to. What she had with Elvis was its own story, one filled with truth, pain, laughter, and loss. And in the middle of all those names and faces, Anita, Priscilla, Sybil, Ginger, only one woman ever said that Elvis Presley was the love of her life without needing to prove it, because she had already lived it before leaving. But what was life like for Linda after leaving Elvis Presley? After Elvis, moving on without letting go.
You couldn't be around Elvis Presley and not fall in love with him. You couldn't be around him and not recognize the magnanimous person he was.
Linda Thompson left Graceland, but Elvis Presley never really left her. Even as she stepped back into her own life, pieces of him stayed in her memory, her heart, and her silence. She didn't go running to the press. She didn't cash in on the headlines. For years, she stayed quiet. People asked questions. Writers reached out. But Linda never turned their story into a paycheck. That silence said a lot. After Elvis, she had to figure out who she was again. Not the helper, not the girlfriend, just Linda. And for a while, she didn't even know what that meant. She moved back to Los Angeles and slowly began picking up the parts of her life she had put down. Acting roles started to come in again. She got back to writing. She joined events. She saw old friends. Bit by bit, her voice returned. But it wasn't easy. In the early 80s, Linda met Bruce Jenner, now known as Caitlyn Jenner. He was famous too, an Olympic gold medalist with a strong public image. He was confident, athletic, and seemed like someone she could build a more normal life with. They got married in 1981 and had 2 sons, Brandon and Brody. For a while, things felt calm. She was a wife, a mother, and had space to breathe. But something was missing. Linda later shared that Bruce had kept a part of himself hidden for years. The marriage ended in divorce after 5 years. There was no drama, just the quiet realization that they were on different paths. Later, she fell in love with David Foster, the music producer. They connected through songwriting, shared interests, and mutual respect. David was creative and driven, and Linda admired his mind. They married in 1991. This time, Linda thought she had found someone who understood her on a deeper level. They even worked together. She wrote lyrics. He produced music. Their creative energy made magic, but the marriage didn't last either. They divorced in 2005 after 14 years. Linda said they simply grew apart. People often asked why her relationships never seemed to match her time with Elvis. Linda never gave one clear answer, but you could feel it between her words. When you've loved someone as deeply as she did Elvis, everything else feels a little quieter. Linda eventually found peace in being single. She focused on raising her boys, writing songs, and staying close to her roots. Her lyrics were recorded by stars like Celine Dion and Whitney Houston. Her pen helped create hits, even if her face stayed behind the scenes. Still, no matter how far she moved from Graceland, Elvis remained a part of her. She kept letters, photos, and gifts from him. Sometimes she'd hear one of his songs on the radio and pause, not to cry, just to remember. She didn't speak publicly about him much. People assumed it was out of respect, and maybe it was. But it was also because she didn't have to explain what they shared. It wasn't for headlines. Years passed. The world changed. so did she. But in 2016, Linda released her memoir, A Little Thing Called Life. For the first time, she opened up about those private years with Elvis. Not to get attention, but because she felt the time was finally right. She was in her 70s by then, older, wiser, and no longer afraid of being misunderstood. She wasn't trying to take anyone's place. She respected Priscilla. She respected the fans. But her story mattered too. She had been there. She had seen him laugh and fall apart. She had stayed when others walked away. And most of all, she had loved him when it wasn't easy. People responded with warmth. Fans who had never known the full story saw her in a new light. They respected her loyalty, her silence, and her honesty. Linda now lives a peaceful life. She enjoys time with her sons, watches them succeed in music and entertainment, and keeps her own memories close but gentle. She doesn't wear sadness on her face. But every now and then when she talks about Elvis, her eyes soften. She remembers his laughter, his kindness, and his struggle. She remembers how he played her favorite songs on the piano just to make her smile. She remembers the notes he slipped under her door when he couldn't sleep. She remembers being the one person he trusted in a world that always wanted something from him. She often says she still dreams about him sometimes. Not the concerts, not the spotlight, just Elvis, sitting beside her, singing softly like he used to at 3 in the morning. She doesn't live in the past, but she doesn't run from it either. Through all the fame, heartbreak, and passing faces, one truth stayed clear. Linda Thompson gave Elvis what no one else could. She didn't just love the legend, she loved the man. And even after all these years, her words still echo loudest. He was the love of my life. Even now, at 75, she doesn't regret staying as long as she did. She only wishes he had lived longer, not for her, but for himself. Because deep down, Linda knew that Elvis didn't just belong to the world. He belonged to himself, and that was the part he never fully found. She knows she walked through something rare, something difficult, something beautiful. And when people ask why it still matters, even after all these years, she answers the same way. Because some loves never leave you. What are your best memories of Elvis Presley? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.